Picture this. It's 3:00 a.m.
Oh, the classic 3 a.m. doom spiral.
Right, exactly. You are just staring at the ceiling. Your mind is running this relentless marathon, just looping through, like, maybe that slightly passive-aggressive email your boss sent at 4:05 p.m.
Yeah, or the mortgage payment that's due next week.
Yes, all of it. And there's just this vague, heavy feeling that you are somehow falling behind in life, you know? So you try to meditate because, well, that's what all the wellness blogs tell you to do.
Right, you download the app and sit there.
Yeah, you try to just force your mind to be quiet. You try to build this psychological fortress to keep all the anxiety out. But the harder you push those thoughts away...
The louder they get, they just scream at you.
Exactly, they get so loud.
It's really the ultimate modern trap. I mean, we approach our own minds like they're a hostile city we need to conquer.
Yeah, we totally do.
We get the productivity apps, we set these super rigid boundaries, we try to, like, armor up against the world.
And it feels proactive at the time.
It feels like you're doing the work, right? But the terrible irony is that the thicker the walls we build, the more suffocated and exhausted we end up feeling inside them. I mean, you are essentially carrying the crushing weight of a fortress on your back everywhere you go.
And that exhaustion, that specific feeling, is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Really glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, because today is actually a massive milestone for us. This is the 8th installment in our ongoing Deep Dive series into the Diamond Sutra, and we are finally tackling the grand finale.
Chapters 31 and 32.
That's right, chapters 31 and 32.
It is the absolute culmination of the entire text.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really fascinating is that when you step into the world of this ancient Prajna philosophy, that blueprint for the psychological fortress you just described, it is completely thrown out the window. It proposes a radically different architectural plan for, well, surviving the human experience.
I want to frame our mission for you, the listener, right out of the gate here. Our goal today is highly practical.
Very practical.
We are looking at these final chapters to extract this ancient, time-tested antidote for modern burnout, workplace stress, and, like we said, that ambient 3 a.m. anxiety.
And we should probably add a quick disclaimer here.
Oh, absolutely. Just to be clear about how we're approaching this, because we are dealing with a profoundly influential Buddhist text here. We aren't here to preach or, endorse religious dogma.
Right, we're looking at this impartially.
Strictly as a philosophical toolkit and as a work of profound psychological insight.
That's a vital distinction, because we're drawing on a really diverse stack of materials today to unpack these final chapters.
We really are. We have insights from ancient commentators like Shenxiu from the 4th century.
Yep, and modern translations and commentaries by Master Nan Wai-Chin.
Right, and we're bringing all of that ancient wisdom into conversation with contemporary psychology.
People like John Kabat-Zinn, the pioneer of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and Byron Katie.
Exactly. We're basically looking at the mechanics of human suffering and the mechanics of freedom, regardless of the cultural package it comes in.
Which I think is the best way to approach it.
So we are heading toward a very specific destination today. We are going to deconstruct the famous concluding 4-line poem of the Diamond Sutra.
The Gatha.
Yes, the Gatha. It is a poem that has literally altered the course of philosophy for millennia. Okay, let's unpack this. But before we can look at those final words and actually understand them, we have to talk about the journey of getting there.
You really do.
Like, why did it take 32 chapters to arrive at this final poem?
Well, to understand the ending, you have to understand the architecture of the whole text. And honestly, reading the Diamond Sutra from start to finish without a guide, it can be an incredibly disorienting experience.
It really can. I mean, it often feels like you're stuck in a philosophical loop.
Yes.
It keeps repeating this specific formula, like A is not A, therefore it is called A, over and over again, applying it to different concepts. It's very easy for your eyes to just glaze over.
Which is exactly why the work of Shenxiu is so crucial here. Shenxiu was this brilliant 4th century monk.
Born around 384 AD, right?
Right, exactly. And he was a disciple of Kumarajiva, who was the great translator of these Sanskrit texts into Chinese.
A major historical figure.
Huge. And Shenxiu was widely considered one of the first thinkers in China to truly, deeply grasp the concept of emptiness, or sunyata, that the Prajna texts were pointing to.
He didn't just translate the words, he understood the underlying operating system.
Exactly. And he provided a structural model for the Diamond Sutra that suddenly makes that whole repetitive structure actually make sense.
So walk us through Sengzhao's map. Like, how does he divide the 32 chapters?
Okay, so Sengzhao argued that the text is actually a deliberate two-part psychological progression. It's not just repeating itself randomly, it's taking you deeper.
Okay.
According to his model, the first half of the sutra, so chapters 1 through 16, focuses on what he called emptying sentient beings.
Emptying sentient beings. I mean, that sounds a little aggressive.
It does sound a bit intense.
Almost like we're being hollowed out. What does that actually mean in the context of, my everyday life?
Right, so it's a technical term for realizing that the self, the ego, the I, that is currently stressing about the mortgage and that passive-aggressive email is an illusion. It is a construct.
Okay, I want to push back on that immediately.
I figured you would.
Because this is where people usually check out, right?
Yeah.
When I stub my toe, it hurts me.
Yep.
When I look in the mirror, I see me. What do you mean the self is an illusion?
Well, it's not that the physical body doesn't exist, or that the pain of stubbing your toe doesn't happen. It's about what you identify as the core permanent you.
Okay, go on.
In Buddhist psychology, the self is described as a temporary combination of 5 aggregates.
The skandhas?
Exactly. Form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Let's ground that a bit.
Yeah.
Give me a real-world equivalent of these aggregates so we can really picture it.
Okay, think of a car. When you point to a car in your driveway, you say, "That's my car." But what is the car, really? It's a chassis, an engine, 4 wheels, some seats, a steering wheel, and a lot of wiring.
Right.
If you take the wheels off, is it still the car? If you take the engine out, where is the carness located?
I see. Right, there is no inherent car floating somewhere in the garage separate from those parts.
Exactly.
The car is just a convenient label we slap onto a specific temporary arrangement of parts.
That is spot on. Now, apply that to yourself. Form is your physical body. Sensation is your feelings, like pain or pleasure.
Like the stubbed toe.
Right. Perception is how you recognize things, like knowing a cup is a cup. Mental formations are your habits, your biases, your active thoughts. And consciousness is the base awareness of all these things happening.
It's a lot of moving parts.
It is. We look at this swirling, constantly changing tornado of physical and mental parts, and we just slap the label me on it.
And then we cling to it.
Fiercely.
Yeah.
Fiercely defend it. We build those 3 AM fortresses around it.
So, emptying sentient beings in those first 16 chapters is basically the process of taking the car apart piece by piece, mentally, until you realize there was no permanent car to begin with.
Yes.
It's letting go of the desperate need to defend an ego that doesn't inherently exist.
Exactly. It's breaking down the 4 attachments mentioned early in the text. The attachment to a self, to others, to living beings, and to a fixed lifespan.
That makes a lot of sense.
And once you stop fiercely defending this illusory I, a massive amount of suffering just evaporates.
Because there's nothing to defend anymore.
Right. You stop taking everything so personally because there's no solid person for the insult to stick to.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm with you. But if that's the goal, and we achieve it by chapter 16, what on earth is the second half of the book about? What happens in chapter 17?
That's the turning point. In chapter 17, the structure almost resets.
How so?
Well, the primary disciple, Subhuti, essentially asks the Buddha the exact same question he asked way back in chapter 2. How should one's mind abide?
Meaning, how do I live?
Exactly. And the Buddha answers it again, but this time he shifts gears completely. According to Sengzhao's map, chapters 17 through 32 focus on a higher level of liberation, emptying dharmas.
Okay, we need to define dharmas here because it's a really loaded word for anyone familiar with Buddhism.
It definitely is.
Most people hear dharma and think of the Dharma with a capital D, like the teachings of the Buddha, the path to enlightenment. But in this specific philosophical context, it means something much broader, right?
Absolutely. In this context, dharmas, with a lowercase gear, refers to all phenomena, all concepts, all mental constructs, categories, and frameworks.
Everything the mind can grasp.
Right. And Sengzhao's profound insight is that once you empty the self, once you realize the ego is a construct, the human mind immediately looks for a new place to build a fortress.
Oh, wow. It just relocates.
Yes. And the most dangerous place it builds that new fortress is out of the concepts of spirituality itself.
Oh, man. The spiritual ego.
Yes. The trap of attaching to the concepts of enlightenment or emptiness or mindfulness.
This is so incredibly relevant today. I mean, you see this everywhere in the wellness space.
Oh, constantly.
Someone reads a few books, or they go on a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat. They do the work of emptying sentient beings. They realize their corporate, stressed-out ego is a construct.
We have this profound breakthrough.
Right. And then they come home and their ego is now completely rigidly built around how enlightened, detached, and mindful they are.
They trade a corporate suit for a pair of linen meditation pants, but the underlying psychological grasping is identical.
It's the exact same mechanism.
Exactly. They start judging their friends who aren't mindful. They get stressed out if their morning meditation routine is interrupted. They have turned the concept of emptiness into a new, solid thing to cling to.
They built a new, shinier cage out of the tools that were supposed to set them free.
That is a perfect way to put it, a shinier cage. And the notes we're working from draw a really fascinating parallel here to modern psychoanalytic theory.
Oh, right. Specifically Jacques Lacan and structuralist linguistics.
Yeah.
Wait, Lacanian psychoanalysis. How does a 20th century French psychoanalyst connect to a 4th century Chinese monk explaining a 2,000-year-old Sanskrit text? Let's unpack this carefully because Lacan can be notoriously dense.
He really can be. But it sounds like a stretch until you look at the underlying mechanism, which is identical.
Okay, lay it out.
In Lacanian linguistics, there's a fundamental understanding that language, the words and concepts we use, doesn't just describe our reality, it actively shapes and limits our reality.
Okay.
Lacan talked about the difference between the signifier, which is the word, and the signified, which is the actual thing.
So like the word water is the signifier, but it won't quench your thirst. It's just a sound we make with our mouths.
Precisely. And the human mind has a fatal flaw. We constantly confuse the map for the territory. We mistake the word for the reality.
I see. So in the context of the Diamond Sutra, attaching to dharmas means we get obsessed with the signifier.
Right. We fall in love with the word emptiness, the concept of non-abiding, the idea of Buddhism.
And by doing that, we completely obscure the actual lived experience of reality that those words were trying to point us toward in the first place.
Yes. You reinforce a dualistic mode of thinking. You forcibly cram this fluid, boundless, selfless existence into rigid conceptual boxes.
Because words are boxes.
Exactly. You start thinking, I am a person who is practicing emptiness. Do you hear the duality in that?
Yeah, there is a you, and there is an object called emptiness that you are trying to acquire.
Right. You've split the universe in half again.
Great.
True wisdom prajna is non-dual. It can't be captured in a concept.
This brings to mind one of the most famous metaphors in all of Eastern philosophy, which appears right here in the text. The raft simile.
Oh, yes.
The Buddha essentially tells his followers, look, everything I'm teaching you is just a raft.
It's a vital metaphor for understanding emptying dharmas. So it's like, imagine you're on a journey and you come to a raging, dangerous river. You need to get to the other shore.
To survive.
Right. So you gather branches, bind them together, and build a raft. You use the raft across the water. It saves your life. It is incredibly useful and absolutely necessary.
But once you reach the other shore and you are standing on dry land, what do you do with the raft?
You certainly don't carry it.
No, you don't pick up this massive, heavy, waterlogged structure, hoist it onto your back, and carry it with you into the forest. It would crush you. You leave it at the shore.
And that's exactly what the Buddha says. The Dharma must be relinquished. How much more so non-Dharma? He is telling his followers that the concepts of non-self, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, all of it are provisional tools.
They are the raft.
They are the raft. They are meant to get you across the river of suffering. But once you understand reality, you have to drop the teachings themselves.
Okay, I have to stop you here because this is where the philosophy gets genuinely frightening for a lot of people.
It's very confronting.
And I struggle with this too. Isn't it terrifying to drop the raft? We use frameworks, rules, concepts, and moral codes to navigate our entire lives.
We do.
They tell us how to be a good parent, how to succeed in our careers, how to be a decent citizen. If emptying dharmas means letting go of all our frameworks, even the noble spiritual ones, don't we just plunge straight into nihilism?
That is the most common and honestly perhaps the most dangerous misunderstanding of emptiness. And the text anticipates this fear.
It does.
Yes. People think dropping the raft means saying, well, nothing is real. Morality is a construct. The self is an illusion. So nothing matters at all. I might as well just sit on the couch and stare at the wall.
Right. Like, why bother going to work if my career is an illusion?
But that is not what emptiness means. Emptiness does not mean denying the existence of reality. It means denying the independent, permanent nature of reality. This is the core of the middle way.
I need you to break that down further. What's the difference between denying existence and denying permanence?
Okay, it's the difference between saying, this coffee cup doesn't exist, and saying this coffee cup is made of clay, water, and heat, and one day it will shatter and return to the earth.
Ah, I see.
The cup is real. You can drink from it right now, but it has no permanent independent cupness. If you connect this back to the raft, dropping the raft doesn't mean you fall back into the raging river. It means you are finally standing on the solid ground of the other shore.
So holding on to the raft on dry land actually prevents you from walking freely through the forest. The framework that saved you in the water becomes a hindrance on land.
Exactly. When you let go of rigid conceptual frameworks, you don't become a nihilist who doesn't care about anything. You become incredibly adaptable.
You become fluid.
Yes, you engage with the reality of the present moment exactly as it is, rather than trying to force the present moment to match your conceptual map of how it should be.
Because the map isn't real anyway.
Right. You don't have a rigid theory of how a career should look. So when your industry changes, you pivot without having a nervous breakdown.
You drop the map so you can actually look at the territory.
That's it. Beautifully said.
Okay, so let's take stock of where we are. We've journeyed through 32 chapters. We've emptied the self. We realize we are the car made of parts.
Yep.
We've emptied the dharmas. We realize our concepts and labels are just maps, not the territory. We've left the heavy raft on the riverbank. We're standing on the shore, conceptually naked.
We have deconstructed everything.
Right. But we still have to wake up on Monday morning.
Unfortunately, yes.
We still have to pay taxes, go to staff meetings, and raise our kids. If we've dropped all our frameworks, what do we actually do? What do we hold on to as we walk through the messy modern world? Because the sutra isn't telling us to go live in a cave.
No, it absolutely is not. And this is where the Diamond Sutra transitions from a work of profound deconstruction into a manual for practical living.
Okay.
At the very end, in chapter 32, it hands us a survival kit for daily life.
And the sources we are looking at distill this survival kit into a beautiful, concise concept. They call it one heart, two keys.
Yes. Yishinrao in Chinese.
This is the operational engine of the entire philosophy. So let's examine the engine. Let's start with the one heart.
The one heart is compassion. But the text doesn't just use a generic word for feeling bad for people. It uses a highly specific phrase, wei ren yan shuo, which translates to explaining it to others or expounding it for others.
That phrasing is crucial. It defines the ultimate state of a bodhisattva, right?
Exactly. A bodhisattva is an archetype in Mahayana Buddhism, someone who has realized emptiness but vows to remain in the world to help all other beings achieve liberation.
They don't just leave.
Right. The one heart means that the natural, inevitable result of realizing emptiness isn't isolation. It isn't retreating to a mountaintop to enjoy your own pristine peace. It is an active, engaged vocal presence in the world.
It's looking around the riverbank, seeing all the other people still drowning in the water, clinging to sinking debris and turning around to help them build rafts.
Exactly. True wisdom is intrinsically, biologically linked to compassion. If you have genuinely realized that the boundaries between you and me are illusions, then your suffering is my suffering.
I can't be free if you are drowning.
Right. So the one heart is the commitment to engage with the messy, painful, bureaucratic reality of human existence.
Yeah.
You go to the staff meetings, you raise the kids, you participate fully.
Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about this transition in mindfulness practice, moving from being a human doing to a human being.
He does, yes.
But the one heart says you maintain that state of human being while still participating in the world of doing.
You don't abandon the world.
Yeah.
You change your relationship to it.
Okay, so the one heart is the motivation. It's engaged compassion. But how do we actually sustain that without burning out?
That's a challenge.
Because if I care deeply about my job, my family, and the state of the world, and I'm actively engaged with all of it, that sounds exhausting. That sounds like a recipe for compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
This is where the two keys come in, right?
Yes. The two keys are the psychological mechanisms that protect the one heart. They are the methods for staying engaged without being destroyed by the engagement.
Tell me about key number one.
Key number one is the key of appearance. The phrasing in the text is, not taking appearances, thusness unmoved.
And key number two.
Key number two is the key of Dharma. This is the final Gotha, the poem that reveals the underlying nature of all phenomena, viewing the world as a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow.
Let's ground this for the listener before we dissect the keys technically.
Good idea.
So what does this all mean? It means playing the game of life fully, but lightly. Imagine you are leading a massive high-stakes project at work, the kind of project where millions of dollars are on the line, the CEO is watching, and you're waking up at 4 a.m. with your heart racing.
We've all been there.
The one heart means you don't just quit, throw your laptop in the ocean, and move to a commune. You stay, you lead the team, you write the reports, you care deeply about the people you manage. But the two keys are the tools you use in the middle of that stressful boardroom so that your fundamental identity and sanity aren't tied to whether the project succeeds or fails.
You play fully but lightly. I love that phrasing.
Let's zoom in on that first key because it sounds like a complete paradox and honestly, a bit impossible. Key 1. Not taking appearances, thusness unmoved. How can you be fully engaged in that stressful boardroom, dealing with difficult personalities, but remain completely unmoved?
To understand how it's possible, we have to deconstruct the psychology of an appearance. When the text says not taking appearances, it does not mean you literally close your eyes, put your fingers in your ears, and ignore reality.
Right.
In Buddhist psychology, an appearance or a sign, the Chinese character is yang, is the cognitive illusion, the story, the narrative overlay that your brain automatically generates in response to a raw event.
Okay, give me a concrete example of the difference between an event and an appearance.
Let's go back to that stressful project. You were in a meeting, and your boss looks at your presentation, frowns, and says, "This isn't what I was looking for. We need to redo the entire third section."
Ouch. My heart rate just spiked a little bit just hearing that hypothetical.
Right, but let's look at the raw event. The event is just sound waves hitting your eardrums.
Just physics.
Exactly. It is vocal cord vibrations moving through the air, conveying information about a PowerPoint presentation. That is the reality. But what does your brain do instantly?
My brain generates an appearance. It instantly screams, my boss hates me. I am incompetent. I'm going to get passed over for the promotion. I'm going to be fired. I won't be able to pay my mortgage. I am a fundamental failure as a human being.
Exactly. That entire catastrophic narrative is the appearance. It is a phantom. It is a story you have constructed. And the moment you take that appearance, the moment you grab onto that narrative and believe it's real, you are moved.
I'm totally moved. I'm wrecked.
You are agitated, terrified, defensive, and thrown completely off balance.
So not taking appearances means experiencing the raw sound waves, hearing the feedback, noting that the PowerPoint needs work without swallowing the poison pill of the narrative. You hear the words, but you don't buy the story.
You let the event happen without adding the heavy layer of me to it. And when you refuse to take the appearance, you naturally achieve the second half of that phrase, thusness unmoved.
Thusness being reality exactly as it is without our projections.
Yes. Your mind remains stable. You can objectively look at the presentation, agree that section 3 is weak, and fix it without your ego bleeding all over the conference table.
There is a quote from the commentaries we're using that perfectly illustrates the mechanics of this. It's from Master Nanhua Chen, and he is quoting a famous poem by the Tang Dynasty poet Bai Jui.
Oh, this is a great one.
The quote is, "Trying to control movement is Zen, but Zen itself is movement. Not doing Zen, not moving. That is thusness."
That is one of the most profound psychological insights into meditation ever written. It addresses the fundamental mistake almost everyone makes when they try to become unmoved.
The mistake being that we try to force our minds to be still.
Precisely. We think that thusness unmoved means we have to violently suppress our thoughts. We sit on the meditation cushion or we sit in that stressful meeting and we aggressively order our brains. Stop thinking about the boss's comment. Be peaceful. Stop being anxious.
But Bai Jui is saying that the very act of trying to wrestle your mind into stillness is, in itself, a frantic, agitated movement.
It's exhausting. You are fighting the mind with the mind. Trying to control movement is movement.
Wow.
True stillness, true thusness, isn't about stopping the thoughts from arising. Your brain is an organ. Its job is to secrete thoughts. You can't stop it any more than you can stop your heart from beating.
So what is it then?
Thus, trueness, unmoved, is simply letting the thoughts, the anxieties, the narratives arise, acknowledging them, and then letting them pass without latching onto them.
You don't fight the appearance, you just refuse to invite it in for tea.
You observe the movement without being moved by it.
Okay, I love the theory of this, but I have a serious pushback.
Let's hear it.
If I practice this, if I truly don't react to anything, if I don't let praise or criticism move me, if I just sit there in thusness, doesn't that just make me a cold, unfeeling robot?
Yeah.
Won't my family and my coworkers just think I'm completely detached and maybe a little bit sociopathic?
That's a very common fear.
Like, how on earth does being an unfeeling stone fit with the one heart of deep compassion we just talked about?
That is the paradox that trips everyone up. But what's fascinating here is that true detachment, the correct kind of thusness unmoved, actually makes you exponentially more empathetic and warm, not less.
I'm going to need you to connect those dots. How does detachment create warmth?
To explain this, the materials we're looking at reference the work of Joan Halifax, a brilliant Zen Buddhist teacher and anthropologist, specifically via Kristen Nepp's research on self-compassion and burnout.
Okay.
Halifax has this incredible physical metaphor to explain the state of thusness unmoved, combined with the one heart. She calls it having a strong back and a soft front.
A strong back and a soft front. I can almost feel that in my posture.
It is deeply somatic. The strong back is the thusness unmoved. It represents your internal structural integrity. It is courage, stability, and equanimity.
It's the core.
Right. It is the core of you that knows it is not the illusory ego, and therefore cannot be destroyed by a passing insult or inflated by passing praise. It is the immovable mountain. You need that immense, unshakable strength to face the suffering of the world.
But you don't stop there.
Right. You pair that immovable strong back with a soft front. The soft front is the one heart of compassion. It is vulnerability, flexibility, and a radical openness to the world's pain and to your own pain.
So the two depend on each other. If I don't have the strong back, if I am completely identified with my fragile ego and I believe every anxious thought I have, I actually can't afford to have a soft front. It's too dangerous.
Exactly. Think about what a threatened ego does. If your identity is fragile and someone criticizes you, you instantly build a hard front.
You get defensive.
You become defensive, cynical, sarcastic, or you just shut down emotionally. You put up the fortress walls to survive.
We armor up.
Yes. But true detachment, knowing that the criticism is just an appearance, just sound waves, gives you the internal invincibility to tear those walls down.
Yeah.
Because you aren't desperately defending a fragile illusion of me, you can actually be deeply, genuinely open to the person criticizing you. You can listen to them. You can feel empathy for their stress.
The detachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you brave enough to be incredibly warm. You don't need armor because you realize there's nothing to protect.
It is the ultimate vulnerability, backed by ultimate invincibility.
To really drive this point home, this idea of radical detachment and not taking appearances, our deep dive materials highlight what is arguably the most famous story in the entire history of Zen Buddhism.
It's a classic for a reason.
It's a story that John Kabat-Zinn points to as foundational, the story of Huineng, the sixth patriarch.
It is a phenomenal narrative. It perfectly encapsulates the difference between a hard front of rigid self-improvement and the strong back of true emptiness.
Let's set the scene. It's the 7th century in China. Huineng is not a scholar. He's not a monk. He is an illiterate, impoverished teenager who sells firewood in the local market to support his widowed mother.
A total outsider.
Right. One day, he's delivering wood to a shop, and he overhears a customer reciting a text. It happens to be the Diamond Sutra. And Huineng hears just one specific line, often translated as, "Develop a mind that clings to nothing," or "Let the mind function without abiding anywhere."
And in that moment, standing in the noisy market with a bundle of wood on his back, he experiences a massive, spontaneous awakening.
He intuitively downloads the entire operating system of emptying dharmas. So he travels hundreds of miles to the monastery of the 5th patriarch, a famous master named Hongren.
But he doesn't get a warm welcome.
No. When he arrives, he is basically laughed at. He's this uneducated, barefoot laborer from the barbarian south. He's not given robes. He's sent to the kitchen to chop wood and pound rice, and he stays there, working in absolute silence for 8 months.
He is the lowest of the low in a highly structured, intellectual, aristocratic, monastic environment.
Now, the 5th patriarch is getting old, and he announces to the monastery that it is time to choose his successor, the 6th patriarch. He tells all the monks to compose a verse demonstrating their true understanding of the Dharma.
A poetry contest, essentially.
Yeah. Whoever writes the best verse gets the robe and the bowl, the symbols of ultimate authority.
And this brings us to the antagonist of the story, Shenxiu.
Shenxiu is the head monk. He is the golden boy. He has studied the sutras for decades. He meditates perfectly. He is respected by everyone. The entire monastery just assumes Shenxiu is going to win.
Even Shenxiu thinks he's going to win.
Of course he does. So in the dead of night, Shenxiu creeps out and writes his verse on a corridor wall. And his verse goes like this. "The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror. At all times, we must strive to polish it and must not let the dust collect.
On the surface, that sounds incredibly profound. It sounds like the pinnacle of spiritual discipline.
It does, and honestly, the reason this story hits so hard is that Shenxiu's verse represents exactly how almost every modern person lives their life.
How so? Connect that to the modern experience.
Well, we treat our lives and our minds exactly like a mirror that we constantly have to polish. We are trapped on an endless self-improvement treadmill.
Oh, totally.
We wake up and try to optimize our morning routine. We try to eat perfectly. We try to manage our stress perfectly. We go to therapy to scrub away our childhood traumas. We meditate to clear out the dust of negative thoughts.
Biohacking everything.
Exactly. We treat ourselves as a precious object that must be constantly maintained, defended, and perfected. We are fundamentally taking appearances. We believe the appearance that we are a dirty mirror that needs cleaning.
That is a brilliant modern translation of Shenxiu's trap. From the perspective of Sengzhao's structural map, Shenxiu is completely stuck in the first half of the sutra. He has created a rigid, dualistic framework. There is a mirror, the self, and there is dust, the world, the stress, the impurities. He is locked in an endless war against the dust. He is striving. He is grasping at the dharma of purity.
He is using his mind to fight his mind, which, as Bai Jui told us, is just more movement.
Exactly.
So the next day, everyone sees Shenxiu's poem and praises it. Huineng, the illiterate rice pounder, hears a young boy reciting the poem in the courtyard. Huineng knows immediately that Shenxiu has entirely missed the point of the Diamond Sutra.
But Huineng can't read or write.
Right. So he asks a local official to walk over to the wall and write a response right next to Shenxiu's poem. And Huineng's verse is the ultimate historical counterpunch. He dictates, Bodhi originally has no tree. The mirror also has no stand. Originally, there is not a single thing. Where is there room for dust to alight?
Originally, there is not a single thing. Where could dust alight? It completely obliterates Shenxiu's entire paradigm.
Break down the philosophy of that final line. Why is no mirror superior to a polished mirror?
Well, Shenxiu was treating the mind as a localized entity, a thing that could be contaminated by external events and required exhausting 204/7 defense.
A physical object, almost.
Exactly. But Huineng realized the profound emptiness the sutra points to. There is no permanent self. There is no fixed mind. Therefore, there is no mirror to get dirty in the first place.
It's empty.
If you truly grasp that originally there was not one thing, you realize there is no target for the stress, the insults, or the burnout to hit.
If the boss criticizes the presentation and you are Shenxiu, you feel the dirty dust landing on your pristine mirror and you frantically try to polish it off by getting defensive, arguing, or having a panic attack.
But if you are Huineng, you hear the words, but because you don't hold a rigid concept of me the perfect employee, the words just pass through empty space.
Wow.
They are birds flying through the sky. They leave no trace, thusness unmoved.
If you are listening to this right now and you feel utterly exhausted by the pressure to constantly improve yourself, to be more productive, to be more mindful, to heal every flaw, Huineng's realization is the ultimate permission to rest.
It really is.
You don't need to fix yourself because the permanent, flawed self you are trying to fix is an illusion. You can just step off the treadmill.
It is a radical liberation from the exhausting full-time job of managing our own egos.
So hearing about an illiterate woodcutter achieving spontaneous enlightenment in the 7th century is incredibly inspiring. But I want to keep this grounded.
Sure.
How do we actually operationalize clinging to nothing?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say there is no mirror when we're analyzing poetry. It is incredibly difficult to remember there is no mirror when you are stuck in gridlock traffic or when your mother says something that instantly pushes your buttons.
This is where the synthesis in our source materials shines. They draw a direct line from this ancient prajna philosophy to modern clinical psychology.
Oh, yeah.
They point out that we have contemporary tools designed to do exactly what Huineng did. They specifically highlight the work of Byron Katie and John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Let's dive into Byron Katie first. Our materials describe her specific method, which she just calls the work, as practically a modern operational manual for Chapter 32 of the Diamond Sutra.
It is uncanny how perfectly her method aligns with not taking appearances. Byron Katie's The Work is a systematic way to dismantle the painful, unexamined narratives we construct.
Okay, how does it work?
It consists of 4 questions and a process called the turnaround.
I want to really explore this. Let's role play this so the listener can hear how it actually functions in real time. Let's use the specific, heavily emotional example provided in the materials. The thought, my mother doesn't love me.
Okay, so you wake up with this thought. Maybe she forgot your birthday or criticized your parenting. Your brain generates the appearance, my mother doesn't love me. You feel the heavy, painful dust land on the mirror.
I feel it.
Katie's first question to challenge this appearance is simple. Is it true?
And as the person suffering, my immediate visceral reaction is, yes, of course it's true. Are you kidding me? Look at how she treats me. Look at the evidence.
The ego fiercely defends its narrative. So you move to the second question, which introduces the wedge of emptiness. Can you absolutely know that it's true?
That is where the fortress wall cracks. Can I absolutely know, with 100% omniscient certainty, what is inside another human being's heart?
Can you?
Can I know that she doesn't love me? Or is it possible she loves me immensely, but she expresses it in a language I refuse to understand? Or is she just drowning in her own unhealed trauma and incapable of showing it? If I am ruthlessly honest with myself, I have to admit, no, I cannot absolutely know it is true.
You've introduced doubt to the appearance. Now, the third question explores the mechanics of your suffering. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought?
When I believe the thought, my mother doesn't love me, my chest tightens. I feel a heavy depressive weight. I build a wall. I act cold toward her. I filter every innocent thing she says through a lens of rejection.
Changes your behavior.
I complain about her to my friends. The thought itself makes me act unlovable, which probably makes her pull away, which reinforces my story. It's a self-fulfilling nightmare.
You are seeing the karma of the thought.
Yeah.
And then the fourth and most liberating question, the Huineng question. Who would you be without the thought?
Wow. Who would I be right now, sitting in the same room as her, if I could completely surgically remove the thought, my mother doesn't love me?
Who would you be?
If I could just drop that narrative, I would feel light. I would be free. I might actually be able to hear her words as just sound waves without the defensive filter. I might look at her and just see an aging woman doing her best. I would be experiencing the reality of the moment, the thusness.
You would be experiencing no mirror.
Hmm.
But Katie's method has one final, brutal, and brilliant step.
Yeah.
The turnaround.
What's that?
You take your original rigid thought, and you physically invert it to see if the opposite might be as true or truer.
So the original thought, my mother doesn't love me, turns into, I don't love my mother.
And you sit with that. When you are holding on to all this bitter resentment, when you are filtering her through your rigid judgments, are you actively loving her?
Ouch. That is deeply confronting. It forces me to look at my own lack of the one heart. Let's try another turnaround. I don't love myself. Am I treating myself with love when I constantly replay this painful, stressful narrative in my head every day? No. I am abusing myself with my own thoughts.
Or the most radical turnaround, my mother does love me. And your job is to find 3 genuine, specific pieces of evidence in your life where that is true evidence that your brain previously deleted because it didn't fit your preferred narrative of being a victim.
By doing this process, you are actively doing the work of the Diamond Sutra. You are dissolving the rigid appearance. You realize that the mother didn't cause your suffering. Your attachment to the story caused your suffering.
And this leads perfectly into how Jon Kabat-Zinn framed MBSR. In the notes detailing MBSR retreats, Kabat-Zinn clarifies that mindfulness is never about escaping reality. It is never about achieving a blank, empty mind.
It's not Sing Sao's emptying sentient beings taken to a nihilistic extreme where you just go numb.
Exactly. Kabat-Zinn says mindfulness is about putting out the welcome mat for whatever rises in your consciousness. Whether it's physical pain, deep sadness, or a racing anxious thought, you don't fight it.
You don't polish the mirror.
You don't try to polish it away like Shenxiu trying to scrub the mirror. You just observe it. You welcome it.
You put out the welcome mat, that is the soft front, in action. You allow the painful experience to enter the room, but because you have the strong back, the profound awareness that you are the room, not the guest, you are the awareness, not the thought, you don't get swept away by it.
This is why combining these ancient texts with modern psychology is so powerful. Ancient prajna from 4th century monks and modern clinical psychology from a 21st century clinic in Massachusetts are prescribing the exact same medicine for human suffering.
It's incredible.
They're giving us the blueprint for living in the fire without catching fire.
Which brings us, finally, to the absolute peak of the mountain. The end of the sutra, the grand finale. Here's where it gets really interesting. We've talked about the first key, not taking appearances. Now we arrive at the second key, the key of Dharma.
The gatha.
Yes, This is the mechanism that allows you to drop the appearances in the first place. It is the famous four-line poem that summarizes the ultimate nature of reality.
It is perhaps the most famous and chanted stanza in all of Mahayana Buddhism.
Let me read the English translation and then the original Chinese because the rhythm is so important. The Buddha says, "All conditioned phenomena are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, like dew and like lightning. One should view them in this way."
Beautiful.
In Chinese, it's Yiki, Yuefa, Rumohampa-ying, Rulavirudi, Ningzoru Shiguan.
It is stunningly poetic. But it's critical to understand that these aren't just pretty melancholic words.
They have technical meanings, right?
Very much so. Each of the 6 metaphors, dream, illusion, bubble, shadow, dew, lightning, holds a very specific technical philosophical meaning regarding how reality operates. They're referred to in the commentaries as the 6 metaphors of prajna.
Let's do a deep dive into each of them because this is the ultimate cognitive reframe for dealing with modern stress. Let's group them. Let's start with the first 2, dream and illusion. What specific aspect of reality are they pointing to?
Dream and illusion represent the false nature of our subjective experience. Think about the mechanics of a dream. When you are asleep and dreaming that you are falling or running from a monster, it feels 100% biologically real.
Oh, yeah.
Your physical heart rate spikes, you sweat, you feel genuine terror.
Inside the dream is reality.
But the moment you wake up, the terror evaporates. You realize the monster had no substantial reality. It was a projection of your own mind.
And illusion.
An illusion, like a mirage or a magician's trick, operates similarly. It tricks your sensory apparatus into seeing something that isn't there. The Sutra is telling us that our waking psychological life operates exactly the same way. The narrative you built about your boss hating you, it felt terrifyingly real in the moment, but it was a waking dream.
When I am stressing about that project deadline at 3 a.m., my body is pumping cortisol as if a tiger is in the room, but the tiger is a dream. The threat to my survival is an illusion.
Okay, that is powerful. What about the next 2, bubble and shadow?
Bubble and shadow represent the law of dependent origination, the lack of independent substance. Look at a bubble. It appears to be a distinct, beautiful, shimmering object.
But it's fragile.
Extremely fragile. It only exists because of a highly temporary convergence of conditions.
Right.
Water, soap, air pressure, and surface tension. The millisecond one of those external conditions changes, the bubble ceases to exist. It has no solid core. And a shadow is even more ephemeral. A shadow literally only exists because a solid object is temporarily blocking a source of light. It has absolutely no independent existence of its own. It is a secondary phenomena.
Exactly. Now, apply those metaphors to what you stress about most. Your career status, your social media reputation, your bank account balance. We treat these things as solid, permanent objects that define us. But they are bubbles and shadows.
This status is a bubble.
Right. Your status only exists because of a massive, fragile web of external societal agreements. It isn't a permanent entity you can cling to. Grasping at it is like trying to catch a shadow in a net.
And when the bubble pops, if you knew it was a bubble all along, you aren't devastated. You just say, that's what bubbles do. Which brings us to the final 2 metaphors, which seem to emphasize speed, dew and lightning.
Yes, dew and lightning emphasize impermanence and the velocity of change. Dew represents a fleeting continuity. It exists, you can touch it on the morning grass, it makes your shoes wet, but as soon as the sun's rays hit it, it evaporates instantly. It cannot survive the heat of the day.
And lightning represents the rapid, flashing, momentary reality of existence. It arises and passes away in a fraction of a millisecond. It's blindingly bright, and then it's gone.
Very fast.
Which, interestingly enough, aligns perfectly with what modern quantum physics tells us about the universe. At a subatomic level, reality isn't solid. It's a field of energy flashing in and out of existence continuously.
Exactly. The universe is a continuous process, not a collection of static things.
But I have to pause here. Because when we list these metaphors, everything is a dream, a bubble, a flash of lightning, an illusion. It is incredibly easy for the mind to slide right back into that dark, cold nihilism we warned about earlier.
It is a risk.
If someone hears this and thinks, okay, my family is an illusion, my pain is a dream, my life is a shadow, they might just completely detach and stop caring about anything. How do we prevent these beautiful metaphors from becoming a depressing trap?
This is the most delicate nuance in the entire philosophy, and the Sort's commentaries lean heavily on Master Nanhuai Chen to clarify it. Nanhuai Chen emphatically states that, like a dream or a bubble, does not mean absolute nothingness. It does not mean the world doesn't exist.
Right. A bubble isn't nothing. It is a bubble. It's right there. You can see it reflecting the light. The dew on the grass actually gets your feet wet.
Exactly. The phenomena exist, but their nature is temporary and conditional. Nen Huaichin says you still feel the heat of the summer sun, you still feel the deep, profound love for your children, you still feel the sting of physical pain.
You don't become a ghost.
You don't become a ghost. The philosophy here is not to escape the dream. The philosophy is to live fully within the dream while remaining consciously awake to the fact that it is a dream.
The analogy I always come back to when trying to internalize this, and I think it's the most helpful way for a modern person to grasp it, is sitting in a movie theater.
Unpack that.
Think about the experience of going to a great movie. You sit in the dark, intellectually, that you are just looking at a flat screen. You know it is just light projected through a lens. It's a literal shadow play, an illusion.
Right.
But what do? You willingly suspend your disbelief. You buy the popcorn. You let yourself get absorbed in the story. When the protagonist's dog dies, you genuinely cry. When the hero wins, you cheer. You engage fully, emotionally, and viscerally with the experience.
You don't sit in the theater with your arms crossed saying, "This is fake. I refuse to feel anything."
Exactly, because that would ruin the movie. But, and this is the absolute crux of the Diamond Sutra, when the terrifying monster suddenly jumps out on the screen, your heart races, but you don't leap out of your seat, run screaming through the lobby, and call 911.
Why? Because even in the midst of the terror, a deeper part of your consciousness holds the awareness. This is just light on a screen.
Yes. You experience the emotion, but you are not bound by it. You don't lose your mind. You are free.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the one heart and the two keys. The movie theater is your life. The one heart is your willingness to sit in the theater, watch the movie, love the characters, and engage with the plot of your life deeply.
And the keys.
The first key, not taking appearances, is remembering not to call 911 when the monster appears so you don't become defensive or reactive. And the second key, the gatha, is a fundamental knowledge that the entire universe is made of projected light. It is dreams, bubbles, and shadows.
You are free to feel the pain of the world without being crushed by it. Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and summarize this incredible journey we've been on today. We have explored the absolute peak of the Diamond Sutra.
We started by realizing the need to empty out our egos, the car made of temporary parts. Then crucially, Shenxiu taught us we must also empty our attachment to our spiritual concepts and rules.
We have to be brave enough to drop the raft on the riverbank.
And in place of that heavy, cumbersome raft, we pick up a lightweight survival kit for modern life, the one heart of active, engaged compassion, and the two keys.
We learn to navigate the boardroom, the traffic, and the family drama using the first key. Not taking appearances, remaining in thusness unmoved. We build a strong back of unshakable emptiness, which allows us to have a soft front of profound vulnerability.
We stop trying to polish a mirror that doesn't exist, like Huineng taught us.
And instead, we use tools like Byron Katie's 4 questions to interrogate and dissolve the stressful stories our brains invent. And finally, the second key, the 6 metaphors. We train ourselves to view our stressors, our successes, and our failures as the beautiful, fleeting phenomena they are. Dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, dew, and lightning.
We learn to watch the movie without calling the police.
So, to you, listening right now, the next time you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., overwhelmed by a deadline, an argument with a partner, or just the heavy ambient anxiety of simply being alive in the 21st century, take a slow breath. Ask yourself, am I clinging to a reflection? Am I frantically scrubbing away at a mirror that doesn't even exist? What would actually happen if I just let the dust settle on empty space?
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. It builds directly on the gatha we just explored.
Okay, lay it on us.
If everything we experience, our bodies, our thoughts, our careers, our very identities, is like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, then who is the one doing the dreaming? When the bubble finally pops, what remains of the air that was trapped inside it?
That is a question to sit with in the quiet. Think about that psychological fortress we talked about at the very beginning of the show. Maybe the goal of life isn't to build thicker, stronger walls. And maybe the goal isn't even to violently tear those walls down. Maybe the ultimate goal is just to realize that the walls, the invading army, and the fortress itself are just light projected on a screen. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. We warmly invite you to join us on our next deep dive. Stay curious.